need to step out for just a moment, be sure to do so. The exits out the back would be preferable. But in general, thank you so much for your attention, and we're going to go ahead and get started now. Take it away, Seth. Real quick again. Oh, there we go. Is that working?
Yes.
Hopefully. Cool. Hello, everybody. My name is Seth Davis. Just a little bit of context real quick. Last year, I decided to do a crazy challenge for myself, completely unprompted, to make 12 games in the entire year of 2025. And so I titled this challenge 12 Games in 12 Months, and we'll sort of get into it. So you may be wondering, who is this guy that's standing up here? Well, first and foremost, I'm a gameplay engineer at Firaxis. I've been there for about 4 or 5 years now. And so, important context, I am an engineer by trade, so take everything within this presentation within that context. I'm definitely not an artist. But I am quite the game jam addict. I love to make games under a short period of time. It's one of my biggest hobbies. You'll often see me do the GMTK game jam. Is the one I'll usually do that every year. Sometimes I'll participate in the global game jam. And then oftentimes at night I'll work on my own little projects that I just have outside of work. For those of you who do not know, I can speak today. I'm an alumni from here at UMBC. I was part of the UMBC Game Developers Club. Yeah, represent. So I've done one of these before. I've been to this before, and it's super exciting to be up here today to talk about this little crazy project that I had. So, a simple plan. It's so easy. So 12 games in 12 months is a lot of games in a very short period of time. So I sort of created some rules for myself around this. Less rules, more like allowances mostly. So ideally, I'd make a game every month, but on average, I didn't want to constrain myself to a game. A game every month. So if I had a really great idea, I could give myself 2 months. If I had a project that was going really well, that I could just do it in a couple weeks. So I didn't want to restrain myself to any specific deadlines. I didn't want to specifically do video games either. I know you guys just did some tabletop stuff recently, so I've worked on some board games as well. I wanted, especially, I'll get into this later, but collaboration with other developers was huge for this project. It was not just me. It would have never gotten done if it was just me. But also, as aforementioned, I do a lot of game jams. So if I did game jams in the year, that counts. And then, of course, all these games would be free to play, ideally by the end of the year. So, did I complete my goal? Yes, I did. I made 12 of them. Thank you. You may be wondering, Seth, did you make this presentation to brag about this? And yes, I did. But also, there's a lot of important lessons that I learned, so much so that you'll probably notice in the bottom right-hand corner, I gave this presentation to Firaxis, where I work currently, and it was super insightful to the developers there. I got permission to bring it here to UMBC, which is really exciting. So yeah, I made 12 of these games, and there's a lot of them. There's a lot of different genres. I made some, strategy games. I like Cryptid Fire and Rescue is a firefighting game where you control cryptids, very fun. I made some very fast-paced games, like POV, Pizza is Illegal, and You're a Delivery Guy. That one was pretty fun. That was also my first 3D game. I worked in Godot. So I wanted to get a good variety of genres, really kind of not fall into the same slump of games that I'm used to making. So why did I do this to myself? This guy, he's a YouTuber. You may know him, Joel Haver. He paused his YouTube channel in 2024 with the goal of making 12 movies in 12 months to show kind of how accessible filmmaking was. Now, if you don't recognize Joel, you may know him from some of his other projects. He's worked in Smiling Friends. He's worked on High on Life, and he's also, most recently, he was Waterboy on Dispatch, if you played that game. So he's a really funny guy. And so he did achieve this. He was able to make 12 movies in 12 months, despite how impossible it may sound. So my question to myself going into 2025, feeling very inspired by this project of his, could I do this with games? Like, was this possible? May feel similar, but it's very different. You can't just put up a camera and do, not to diminish filmmaking at all, but you can't just put up a camera, read some lines, and then edit later in post. There is a whole, you need art, you need music, you need programming, you need designs, you need all sorts of stuff. So what would with all this to do in a year, what would I create? I was like, genuinely didn't know. I didn't have any plans going to this. I didn't know what ideas would sort of blossom under these sorts of restrictions. And most importantly, what can I learn and what can I bring to you guys today about what I learned? So let's see. Starting is the most important part. You guys have heard this advice a million, billion, trillion times, and I know it, and I know you hate it, and I even hate it myself, but it's so true. Just do it, man. You just gotta start. Motivation is super important. That is probably the biggest struggle for me during this whole sort of challenge, was like staying motivated, especially when you're like in the middle of a project that maybe you don't think is going the way you hoped. So sometimes it can just be really important to get started. So most importantly, just try and do like one thing a day. Like that can be anywhere from like writing one line of code or fixing a bug or drawing a sprite or making a sound effect or writing like one design for like an ability that you want to have in the game. So like just doing one thing, and then you can just say like, I did it, and you won't feel bad about yourself later. But here's the great part about doing one thing is chances are, at least this is in my experience, if you like the project you're working on, you'll get sucked right back into it. The moment you implement one thing. Oh, that one line of code I wrote, I was playing the game and it caused a bug with another system. Let me go fix that other system up. Oh, this sprite I made, it would really look nice if it was animated. Like, why don't I animate this? Oh, this design I wrote, let me implement it into the game. And I didn't really, achieve the design I wanted to. So let's go back to the drawing board on that. So these sorts of small changes you can make can often balloon into, larger changes, and you can just find yourself getting sucked right back into the project all over again. And of course, there are many other ways to get motivation for your project. Most notably, if you just play your game. I think for me, there were definitely a few projects where I would just play it longer than maybe I should have working on these projects. So once you have a project that you can really just play as a player, that's how you know you've got something great, and it really helps you to like decide and figure out like, oh, what else would be cool in this? What else could I do? Of course, collaboration is another great way to get motivation. If having other people who are just as excited about your project as you are is super big. And also just sending it to friends and family for like play testing is really huge. Sometimes they have opinions on things that you would have never have thought of, and sometimes they crash your game. So that's also very fun. But creating reusable systems, yeah. So this is I did mention I was a programmer. So this is me talking about programming for a bit. But it's important for everybody. When designing a game system, it's really important that you make it robust enough to basically be reused, especially in this challenge. I reused a lot of these systems across many different projects. You'll see on the side there's 3 different games that I made. The top one was called the Stargazers Club, the middle one was called Curse Words, and the bottom one was called Gummy Bear Stretch. And they're all Very, very different games. Top one was a bit of an RPG. The middle one was like a typing game. The bottom one was like kind of a puzzle game. All different dialogues, all the same system. They visually look very different, but under the hood, they are all running the same code for reading text and interpreting them and animating it. You'll see there's a little wiggle. I don't know how easy it is to see on the screen from the room, but there's like little wiggles in the text, or like how it sort of moves across the screen. All very important for that system. So that was like super helpful when developing these games. It even helped with like motivation to be like, oh, I need a dialogue system for this game. Oh, I made one. It was last month or a year ago, or oh, let me reuse this. The code just needs a little bit of tweaking, and then suddenly it works for my needs. So that can be really important when you're just at a short time span. You need something quickly, and just seeing things work can really help. Oh, let me go to the next thing. It will save you a massive amount of time generally. And of course, this is coming from Firaxis Games. This is what Sid Meier very famously does in his free time. He loves making systems like this. He spends a lot of his time doing it. And yeah, some other examples I think from my project is I made an ability system for the first game that I mentioned earlier. Cryptid Fire and Rescue was a tactics game, so I made a whole ability system for that. Probably put way too much time into it than I should have. It took that project probably took the longest out of most because I decided to do that. But the great thing about that is I was able to reuse that ability system for Stargazers Club, which was, despite being two different types of games, one was tactics, one was a real-time action game, I could use the same ability system, and it saved 1 billion hours of dev time on those other projects. And of course, I don't have an image of it here, but there was a project I made called Too Many Tabs. It was a game about being an IT guy working at the CIA, and the secret agent needs your help, but your computer sucks, so you have to manage all your tabs. I made a whole system for that, specifically for that game, about like opening and closing apps and tabs and how you can move them around like you would on like your desktop. And it made it so easy that I probably made way too many apps and half of them did not get into the final game because part of them were just like not even necessary. I just did them for fun. All right, collaborate. This is what I've been getting at since the beginning. As much as I would love, and I'm sure you would love to make a game all by yourself, there are people that do that, and those people are insane. But they make some great stuff. But if you're just like me, or you're just learning, it can be hard to just do everything yourself. I'm not an artist. I'm a terrible artist. You do not want to see the art I make. But this is where you can recruit your friends, and you can really, if you can get people enthusiastic about your project, it can help with, like I said, motivation. It can be really motivating to see like good art in your game. This is me speaking, but generally, it's really fun to just like when you get an asset sent by someone you've worked with that you've been really hoping for. It can help, oh yeah, let me get that in the game. And then, oh, well now that's in the game, I'm noticing some like things I would love to change about how the game plays. And then that starts that cycle all over again. And you can also gain a larger audience. If you're trying to gain an audience, the more collaborators you have, the merrier. Over here are a few examples of art that I did not make. But we've had some dinosaurs, some amazing player sprites animated, some 3D models that some of my amazing collaborators worked on, and I will thank them at the end of the presentation. All right, but what if you don't have friends? Some of you may relate to this. Asset packs are an amazing way to do this. I used a ton of asset packs for these games. Actually, really? Ton is a bit of an exaggeration. I had like 2 that I found that I really liked. and they were these top-down pixel art ones that were super helpful. You see that there's that tree I put there. That tree I probably used in like 10 of the 12 projects. That's a really nice tree. I love that tree, man. And yeah, these two asset packs, they were like $5 total, maybe. Like not super crazy. You can get them on itch.io. And they saved me a ton of time. And it can really help you get like a vision of what you want your game to look like too. Now, I do want to add a bit here. If you're going to be collaborating with yourself, there is a bit of a siren song of AI. It's going to be a hot button topic, I'm sure. It's already been touched on by some of our other presenters, but I did, experiment a little bit with making assets, content with AI, and it often kind of produced some low quality stuff. Now, a lot of these games I was making were pixel art or 3D, which AI is especially not very good at doing. So take that with a bit of a grain of salt. You can also, cost money for each asset you want to just generate too. Often, which is like compared to like the one-time payment you would have for like asset packs. And they're also not usually game ready. You'll probably need to edit them to like make their backgrounds transparent and that sort of stuff. That being said, I did find it helpful to use ChatGPT to like as a rubber duck. And if you don't know what that kind of means, a rubber duck in programming is sort of like someone you can bounce ideas off of or just talk to kind of figure out a problem without just staring at your screen in silence for like an hour. Sometimes it can really help to just like talk to someone, and if it's just you, then you can, an AI is usually pretty helpful with that. It's also really cool. You can get like some ideas that maybe you never thought about that like, oh, like, the AI says this would be a cool name for my project. That's actually not a bad idea. Like I didn't have a name yet. That would be interesting. So yeah, I think generally it's not useless, but I do say, I think especially for students, I don't want people to get caught in the like, the vortex of it, We'll always make sure the code that, if you are using AI to help write code, make sure you review that AI's code, make sure you always understand what it's outputting before putting it in your game. And that goes the same for content and art and stuff. All right, final thoughts. Would I do it again? Hell no, dude. That was crazy. But am I glad I did it? Hell yeah. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of stress, but at the end of the day, I had some really great games, and at the end of each sort of project that I created, I always felt accomplished, even if the project wasn't entirely reaching the hopes. I wasn't going into this thinking, I'm going to make 12 amazing, timeless masterpieces. No, I knew some of them were going to suck, because just by the nature of the challenge. Because there weren't always bangers. But I did always learn something, yes and no. Some projects I just really wanted to make. Like, for example, Fossil Fit was a game I made last year. It was a puzzle game about uncovering dinosaur bones and then reassembling them puzzle piece style. I've had that idea in the back of my head in a Google Doc somewhere for like ages, and I'm like, I need to make this one day. Did I win anything for that project? Not really, but I had a lot of fun making it. But there are other projects like the pizza delivery game where I had not worked with 3D and Godot before. And that was like super insightful just to kind of pressure cook myself into like, I gotta make a 3D Godot game in a month. What would be fun for this? Pizza delivery game, how about that? So that was super insightful. I learned a lot about it. But at the end of the day, yeah, I had 12 games that I could point at and say, yeah, I did that. And of course, I want to use this opportunity to just kind of encourage everyone that's here and that makes games to kind of not just to create, but really enjoy the process of creating, because you can really find some amazing things, find some amazing ideas. All right, and just a quick special thanks for all my collaborators. These are a couple Firaxis folks. Dimitro Nebesh, he's from Firaxis. He's a sound designer. He did all the music. Amazing, crazy guy. He did all the music and sounds for me, which was amazing. Chandrahas, he's a 3D animator. He worked on the 3D titles with me. Kyle Bunk, he's a 2D animator. Well, he did the pixel art. He's an ex Firaxis. I don't know where he is now. He might be at. I'll have to check, but he is he's usually or from Firaxis previously. He did some sprite animation for me, which was awesome. Michael Cody, he also did some amazing sprites. He also made this awesome little diorama collage banner thing, which was really cool in the style of UFO 50, if you've played that. And of course, Ian Chwinski is a friend of mine from college. He's a writer. He worked on all the typing games and all the dialogue-heavy games with me, which saved a lot of time, because it turns out it takes time to write dialogue, you guys. It's not easy. All right, and then I open up to questions. All right, I'm going to start with you. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Earlier in your presentation, you said gain a larger audience. Do you have any tips on how to do that?
That is a good question. I've done a few events in the past. I think gaining an audience, I don't necessarily have a large audience. I think I should say that first. But in the past, if you've ever, we have a local chapter of the International Game Developers Association, the IGDA. That is a great spot to meet other local developers and also find events where you can take the games that you are making. So that is often the place where I find that I get the most success in getting an audience for the games that I'm creating, because you can literally sit down with your players and they can play it in front of you. You can watch them. They'll tell their friends about it. They'll come over and play it. And generally, you can send out links. I know there are a lot of people here who are actually working on Steam games, so they might have more information about. I don't know why I'm looking at you. So they might have more insight into exactly how that works in the more like network of Steam projects, but. Yeah, as for like smaller projects, like what I'm working on, I would say like local events are yes, right here with the nice hair. It's good hair, man.
How would you, so hypothetically you're done with most of these games, right?
Yeah.
But if you weren't, and let's say like you wanted to move on with like a few of these ideas, how would you kind of gauge what ideas would be worth moving on with?
I think the two factors, the two factors that I think I would use were like how much fun did I have working on it, and how much fun did people have playing it, and that including myself. So I think, let me go back to like where I had all those. Yes, these. So for example, I think one popular one was Pentuple. It's right up in the top left-hand corner there. That was sort of a dice Balatro type game. Had a lot of fun just making little ability jokers. If you've played Balatro, you can use sort of like powers to upgrade your run, your roguelike run. So I had a lot of fun making all those little powers for like this dice Yahtzee game. And also a lot of people had fun breaking it. And a lot of people would just find the craziest combos of like, hey Seth, the integer overflowed and now the screen is showing 9 billion times. So it's like, oh, okay, well I should probably fix that or leave it, I don't know. But that was a lot of fun to work on. That's probably a project that I would continue if I had the chance. There's also projects that I don't think I quite completed yet, like Stargazers Club was a bit of a larger project. It was sort of an RPG, real-time action RPG. So I think there's a lot of depth there that I didn't get to explore. So that's probably another type of project that I would, might take a second look at. Cool. Over here.
What were the board games you worked on?
Yes, the board games. I've worked on some board games in the past, but I did one for this period. It was 52 stick up. I designed it in a way I wanted it to be easily printable and playable for people who might not have a chance to because board games require physical components. Not everyone has, dice or something. So I wanted to make it so that you could print it out. You can go to the itch page and print it out on any old printer, and then the only thing it requires physically is a deck of 52 cards, which I think most people usually have. So that was the design goal with it. And it's generally, if you've ever played Root, some people may be familiar with Root. I see one person's very excited. Root is like an asymmetrical game where you kind of everyone has their own goals and they're all using the same resources. So that was sort of the idea with 52 stick up, was everyone has the same resource of the 52 cards, but everyone's sort of playing their own sort of goal. All right. Yes, up here in the nice suit.
So, evidently with these 12 games, you had 1 month to do each. Because we all are doing a bunch of projects, some may fail, some may succeed, we may not finish them. How much time do you believe that should be spent on a project, or can you give a quantification of when we should decide, hey, we've learned from this, let's move on to the next thing?
That is a tough question. I think it definitely depends on the project. I mean, for this challenge in specific, I had sort of the hard deadline of I need to make 12 of these, so maybe now is the time I end it. But I think what's most important for the first thing you should do when you're trying to make a project is something called an MVP, minimum viable product, not a most valuable person. That's different. Yes, so minimum viable product is when you can basically show the game off and be like, this is something that we could sell if there was more to it. We just need to add content. There's a base game here, it's fun to play, it's got the nice art, you can play through a level, or you can run through one run of this roguelike, but there's not a lot of content to it. So the only really thing you would need to do is expand on the systems that we have implemented, or add more levels, or add more powers, or art, or sounds. I think at that point, that's usually a good time to take a step back and be like, hey, is this worth continuing? Did we learn what we've learned? Was this a good project? Yes, up top.
How much time did you spend working on 52 stick up compared to the video games?
Well, so 52 stick up, I will say the most of the time that I spent on 52 stick up, and this was kind of what surprised me about it, was that play testing was huge for that one. When you make a video game, you can be like, oh, there's some bugs that I gotta fix, and it generally works. But when 52 stick up probably required the most play testing, I would write rules, and then I would have a general idea in my head of how the game would play, and then I would sit in front of some people, and they'd be like, this doesn't make any sense, dude. And so that would be sort of the, quote, bugs I would have to fix with it. So it took longer than I expected, I would say. A lot of it comes down to especially in a very systemic game where you have a lot of different things happening, like Root. It's important to get the vocabulary and the rules very strict and down very tight. So that is what I spent a lot of my time doing. Now, it doesn't take a lot of time to make the components for the game, but it did take a lot of time to sort of write the rules, get everyone on the same page, find what strategies were sort of becoming dominant, especially for a multiplayer versus game. In the first draft of the game, I think there was one specific class that was just overpowering and very 90% of the game. So I had to take a step back and be like, oh, why is this happening? Oh, it's the only class that can draw cards. That's crazy. Maybe that shouldn't be the case. Maybe everyone should be able to do that. So that's sort of an example of what needed to happen. But yeah, I would say it surprised me how long it took compared to the others. Yeah, Rick.
Now,
I wanted to ask, of the projects that you have here, which one do you think has the most potential to go on to be like a full type Steam game release, or do you think you could take the farthest?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's like choosing my favorite child. Except
My
it's
mom knows which
easy.
one she has.
Oh yeah, yeah. We all know it's you. I think if I had to pick, it would probably be Stargazers Club, specifically because earlier I had mentioned that I think there's a lot of unexplored depth. I mean, it already is sort of a very systemic game. It's a top-down action RPG. So like RPGs in general usually have a lot of depth there. And this is as I was saying earlier, this was sort of an MVP of what that project might look like. So really, it only had 1.5 zones that you could explore, like 2 enemies and a boss, and like 2 sort of special abilities. So I think there's a lot of room for that game to grow potentially into something else. Yeah, in the middle here.
You've talked about how your goal was to make 12 games in like a year, and with that you probably have ideas or original ideas, but then the scope of that could very much balloon. So my question is, how can you prevent like scope creep or prevent yourself from biting off more than you can chew?
All right, how can I prevent scope creep? Yeah, so this is a good question. I think it's definitely something that you kind of gain a muscle for when you work on a lot of game jams. I think the number one thing for scope creep is like sort of just like what I was saying earlier with an MVP. Just make sure you can get like the basics in. And are the basics, easy to sort of if it's a short-term, like for a game jam, if you're making it in 2 days, you probably don't want to make a game that has a bunch of different levels and a bunch of different mechanics. You'll probably want to make sure that you have like one mechanic that you're really excited about, and then as the project develops, you'll find what makes that sort of fun. I would say scope creep sort of happens as you're developing, so it's really important to just kind of it's sort of a learned skill. It's just to be able to realize when you realize that you are adding something that might not be sort of required for the fun of the project at its core, and just sort of being able to rein that in. But yeah, thank you for your question. Yeah, right here.
I know you already said that these are like your 12 kids, but I would love to ask you which one is your least favorite.
Oh, that's easy.
Well, because I'd love to know what went wrong and like, what you would have done different.
Yeah, my least favorite child is Billiards Brawl. I hate that kid. I think that one specifically kind of fell through the cracks because it was a very busy month for me already. So I had a lot of extra life stuff going on, so I didn't have a lot of time to work on that game. It kind of, the general idea for Billiards Brawl was like, oh, what if you were playing pool, but your the cue ball and all the other balls that you're playing with had like special powers that you, like, oh, like this one, when it hits another one, it causes an explosion and all of them go flying. I was like, what if we had something like that? And so I made a general system for that, and it was fun to make different powers for that for a period. But I had originally, the version that's posted is a 1v1 hot seat multiplayer. And I think near the end of the project, someone who was playtesting it said, hey, this would be way more fun if it was like a roguelike. And I was like, damn, he's right. Sucks. No, it's still like an okay game. I had a lot of fun making it, but I think it's one of those things that I think if it took a little more time in the design room, then it would have come out a lot better. And relating to sort of scope creep, like asked earlier, it was coming to the end of the month. Like I knew I had other projects that needed to be worked on. So I inevitably just kind of finished up what I had, as an MVP for that idea, and then maybe somewhere down the line I'd come back and turn into a roguelike or something like that. Yeah, all the way up there in the decked out 20th anniversary shirt. Represent.
Okay, so as your games are now, not what they have the potential to be, would you be interested in doing like a quick tier list?
Quick, dude, that's like 12. I could make one later. I could say my top favorite was probably Fossil Fit, which is the puzzle game that I've wanted to make for a while. And my bottom is Billiards Brawl. But the in-betweens, I do not know, unfortunately. I could probably spend hours thinking about that. Yeah. Eric? Yes.
Oh, no, I'm Henry.
Oh, wait. Oh my God, you look like someone I know.
He does look like.
You do look like Eric. Oh my gosh, Henry.
No, Henry, not it. But so when you were talking about the reusability of systems and games, when you were making a game and you were like, did you think at the moment like, hey, I might be able to use this for another game, so you made it so it was a little more compartmentalized?
Yeah, well, not really, because I made these with sort of the game jam mindset. I do a lot of game jams, so the mindset that I usually have when I'm making a game jam is like I just got to get it out the door. I don't want to get hung up on like making sure everything is compartmentalized and it's very neat. I write some very ugly code for some of these games, which is bad, but you know, it happens. So there was one period I tried to, for Cryptid Fire and Rescue, probably why it took longer than the other titles was I did try to compartmentalize the ability system a little bit, because I knew like this could be useful on other projects. But after I realized how long it sort of took to do that, I decided on future projects, like with my dialogue system for Gummy Bear, which originally started with Gummy Bear. I said, well, I'll just kind of keep it in its own folder, but it like I don't really mind if it like, you know, gets connected with other systems. I can always come back later and tear it up and turn it into its own thing. So I think for smaller projects, it's fine if something's connected, but I think for larger projects, it's important to compartmentalize. Yeah, up here.
Where'd you get the inspiration for all these ideas? Because I noticed a lot of these are kind of based off of other games. Some things use some common tropes like deck of cards and dice, but a lot of these appear to be like unique games. I was wondering where the inspiration came from.
Dreams, thin air. I don't know. I think some of these were like old projects that I had like stirring around in a Google Doc. Like Fossil Fit I had mentioned was an idea that I had wanted to do for a while, just hadn't had the time, so I decided I'd dig up that old idea. Some of these were like I would play a game mid-year and be like, oh, it would be cool if this game had this. So that was sort of what Cryptid Fire and Rescue was. I played a firefighting game, and I was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if you were like monsters from cryptozoology? That'd be cool. So usually I never had a plan. I didn't really have projects that I was like, oh, I cannot wait to make, Stomp Your Past. That is, absolutely gonna make it. It usually just came out of thin air when I was about to, move into the next month or coming off of the last project. I'd be like, oh, what's something that really interests me right now that I can start thinking about? Right here.
So you work at Firaxis, you do game jams, and you're an indie dev. Where did you get to the time of the day to do this?
I don't know, man. I think most importantly, with my job at Firaxis, I take my work-life balance very seriously. I think that's important for everybody, developers and students alike. I show up usually like a little before 9, head out a little after 5, make sure I have some time to myself to work on my own projects when I get home, because I get a lot of fulfillment out of my own projects, and that kind of fuels my development back at work. It's sort of like a nice feedback loop. That is kind of how I find the time to do that. Of course, it's not always perfect. Like I said, with Billiards Brawl, I had a lot of, stuff going on. Not bad stuff, just like, sometimes life just goes crazy and you've got all sorts of extracurricular things going on that you takes priority. So it's important that I think, like, choose your priorities correctly, but at the end of the day, it's like, just kind of find what makes you happy and what, fuels the rest of your life. Yeah.
Hell
Hell yeah. Cool. Yeah.
What does your average planning process look like for any given idea?
Like 0. That's not true. That's a bit of an exaggeration. I have. Ooh.
You're good.
I stepped on my thingy. There are some design documents that I wrote. Sometimes I just kind of, let it rip and just kind of start programming and to see what I kind of get hung up on, what sort of ideas kind of excite me. A lot of these would be like, a friend of mine had an idea and like, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if I did that? So generally, yeah. I just, generally just like had fun with it. Yeah, right, what's up?
What got you into game development? Was there any specific game or project that motivated you to kind of go down this rabbit hole?
Wow. Well, so for what motivated me? For the 12 or just game development in general?
In general.
Just in general? I don't know. I mean, I played Mario as a kid, and I was like, that seems pretty sick. I'd love to do that. So, I mean, I think growing up, I really wanted to do game dev, and then I came to UMBC for computer science, and I was like, well, I really like programming too, so we had this amazing game developers club. Maybe you guys have heard of it. I don't know. And that was sort of what I think bridged the gap for me of like, oh, this could be a career maybe. Yes, the guy in the amazing hair again.
I like to ask this for a lot of developers because it's always been interesting what they say. If there was a game you could recommend to all of us to play that like shows a really good example of design and like how to do so, what would you recommend?
Hades, maybe? I love Hades, man. I mean, that's kind of just like me saying my favorite game though, so.
Favorite game's always like subjective a little bit, but like just for design-wise is what I use it. Design-wise,
yeah, I really like, I still Hades. I think it's really well designed. I love roguelikes. I think roguelikes are the best way to sort of like take an idea far and just see what you can make out of something. There's probably a million other examples I could think of, but I will recommend that. Yes.
So what's your itch page so we can check out?
Right. I should post a link in the channel. I would have put a QR code, but it'd go on your phone and you can't play the games on your phone. So, I could post a link in the UMBC Game Dev Discord if that's possible. I don't know. Okay. Or anyone else, I can send you it if you need. But yeah, I have a collection of these on itch, so you can play them in order or non-order, whatever you like. Yeah.
As an experienced jammer, are there certain genres or mechanics that you would recommend people stay away from?
Stay away from?
During game jams.
During game jams. Yeah, what projects or what genres would I stay away from on game jams? I would say anything content heavy. I think this trap I fall in sometimes of like when you have a really cool idea and it requires a lot of like content to make it work. So like something where like a bunch of if you have to make a bunch of levels, that can often consume a lot of time. Now it's not necessarily a bad thing that you should stay away from because it can work. Like a lot of puzzle games from game jams end up becoming very popular. But I find that is often more difficult than making a game that's like repeatable, like a high score chaser for game jams. You definitely don't want to make something with a lot of systems like an RPG or something with a lot of like Cryptid Fire and Rescue is probably another good. I had to make a whole ability system for that. And there's a whole tiled system because it's a tactics game, and there's a whole destruction system because it's firefighting. And oftentimes, if you find yourself being like, oh, and then we can add this and this and this and this, it's usually not good for a game jam. All right, any more? Are there questions on the stream?
Actually, the question was, where can you play it? So
Okay,
you answered it.
then all right, awesome. I will post that link later. Cool. Okay, I think that's it then.
All right, clap it up for.
Thank you guys.